Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, handmade knives. What are they and what's all the fuss about? So most of the time I like making videos about how to actually do things, but every now and then I think it's good to kind of step back and philosophize a little bit. Ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? How do you go about it? And that's kind of what we're going to do here today. So I started out really as a Japanese sword guy professionally, and then in more recent years I've started doing more kind of production-oriented modern tactical knives. Very different kind of workflow, very different, I guess you might say, different philosophy, both in how I do what I do and what those end results are. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of handmade crafts and kind of how that applies to knife making. So maybe it's a mistake to, respond too much to what, trolls say on forums and stuff. But you'll see a lot of folks, if you poke around on the forums, talking about, what is a handmade knife? And sometimes people give grief to somebody because they say, well, this guy used a water jet, or this guy plasma cut that, or, The I guess basic question that those guys are trying to get at, though, is, what is it that distinguishes a knife made in a factory in China from a knife that's handmade by an individual craftsman? Maybe I should pull China out of the mix and just say, what's the difference between a factory knife made in, Oregon or Connecticut or something, versus me in my little shop making my stuff. And some people really like to make kind of a moral point out of this. They want to say that, like, oh, factory stuff is bad, it's crap, it's, there's something sort of suspect about it, versus something that's handmade and there's something, I don't know, sort of magical and creatory and, beautiful about that. Is there some legitimacy to that or not? So here's where I fall on that. My first goal when I make a knife is to make something functional at as reasonable a price as I can, given what it is that I'm making. And really, that's no different from what factories are trying to do. Spyderco, Buck, Kershaw, Boker, all those guys are trying to do the exact same thing. But where craftsmen, individual craftsmen, can distinguish themselves from the factory is that, kind of the secret sauce here is the individual is going to put their personal stamp on it. Every product that they make is an expression of their own personality. And I think that, collectors and guys who are interested in handcrafted knives, that's what they want. They want to feel like there's a straight line between them as a customer, a user, a collector, whatever, and that craftsman. And, I really think that there's a lot of validity to that. But here's where I think sometimes people go off track. There's maybe an assumption among some buyers anyway, that because you buy something that's handcrafted, it's somehow intrinsically superior, that it's made better, that the result is going to be, that they should be able to expect perfection because they paid, $400 for a knife instead of, $150 or, $30 or whatever a factory knife might cost. And I really think that's a mistake. In fact, there are certain ways that having really high-tech, industrial type machinery and controls and so forth can, result in very high-quality knives. The issue really, to me, is not, is it a good knife? We all are capable of making very good knives. The most important thing, is getting back to the point that I made earlier, which is ultimately you're trying to get something that's unique. And that uniqueness, that sense that, hey, I've got something here that nobody else has got. That is a much more important part of what handcrafted items offer than quality per se. Now, look, the highest quality craftsmen are able to produce super high quality knives. The fit and finish is, immaculate. And it's right to expect that when you pay a certain amount. But to me, that's not ultimately what those guys can deliver. It's part of what they deliver. So, when I make a Japanese sword, for instance, I wouldn't necessarily say that the quality of the tool per se, and we're talking about tools here ultimately, whether it's a sword or a little pocket knife or whatever, they're still tools. My most expensive, $10,000 sword as a tool is not necessarily much higher quality than one of my production Tactics Armory type knives. Those are made to a very, very high standard too, and they should be expected to work without failure. What really distinguishes the Japanese stuff from those more production oriented kind of blades is that I'm really pushing at the edge of the envelope of what I'm capable of doing, and I'm producing something that's unique. I do it one time and it comes out a certain way, and you will never see that knife again. Whereas with the production things, what I'm delivering is really high quality, but not uniqueness in those, in those Tactics Armory knives. It comes, I won't say it's a production line, but it's a production process. So this kind of leads to something that I really feel like sometimes people get wrapped around the axle with that they shouldn't. And that's the question of, like, how handcrafty is this thing? So, here in my shop, I've got sort of industrial quality belt grinder, a mill, I've got, fancy testing equipment, all kinds of, a lathe and drills, and, it's high quality sort of industrial grade stuff. They're machines. Everything that I make inside this particular shop anyway has my hands on it, and I'm controlling that machine with my hands. So it's handcrafted in that sense, but hey, this is a step above, say, making it with files and a brace and bit and things that are powered exclusively by human muscle. 1,000 years ago, that's the way a craftsman worked. Today, you have power hammers and hydraulic forge presses and lathes and all these kinds of things, but you're still controlling them with your mind and your hands. So there's one step that is kind of challenging this whole model of, okay, there's a guy in a room, he's doing everything with his hands, and so that's a handcrafted knife. And that's, all this computerized equipment that is appearing on the scene right now. 15 years ago, let's say, buying a CNC mill or CNC lathe, that was just not in the realm of possibility for, the average individual craftsman knife maker. Today, those are very much in reach for, sort of normal guys. All kinds of CNC routers, there are CNC lathes, water jets, and plasma cutters, 3D printing. All of these tools are now kind of at the disposal of the individual knife maker. And so it kind of poses a question for a guy like me, how far down that road do I want to go towards what's almost a factory approach versus how far do I want to stay towards the model of, my Japanese type blades, where, it really is a one-off project each time I make a blade. So I was alluding to this sort of moral issue of, is this handcrafted or is this not, and the assumption that the more low to the ground that you get, the fewer machines you use, the more handwork that's involved, the more, somehow noble it is. I think this is looking at this in the wrong way. My feeling is that the important thing is that there is, with individual craftsmen, that there is an honest relationship between the craftsman and the purchaser. I've heard about, instances of guys at gun shows, with a table full of knives saying, oh yeah, I made all these knives, when in fact they bought them from Pakistan. That's dishonest. And, is the quality of the knife good or bad because of, where it was made? Not really. But there's a difference in accountability. If this guy bought a whole passel of knives from Pakistan, stuck them on a table and said, hey, I made these, well, you take your knife home and it, breaks on you or whatever, there's no accountability for this guy. He can't go back and say, hey, I messed up the heat treat on that. I'm going to fix it by giving you this other knife that's perfect. All he can do is give you another knife from Pakistan. Whereas an individual craftsman, if he screws up, hey, he owns it. He says, my bad, I'm going to give you a better knife, a deal, whatever, but I'm going to be accountable for the actual products of my hands. So what if you're using, CNC machinery or whatever? As an individual craftsman, you still have the opportunity to have this honest connection with your buyer. And that to me is the really important thing, is that if you're using water jets and CNC machines or whatever, or you're hammering it out by hand and doing the heat treating in a forge and filing the blade to shape and so forth, it's just a question of you honestly expressing to your customers what it is that you're making. It's that simple. As long as the customer understands what your process is and what it is that you're delivering, everybody should be happy. So, what's the implication to this for, most of the guys that are watching this, which is, hobbyists and so forth? Here's my point. If you get on the forums and hear people saying this is bad, this is good, making these moral judgments about how you go about making things, I think you really got to give them the big middle finger. Anything that you're doing in your shop is you. It's an expression of your personality. It's an expression of where you are in your life and what you're trying to accomplish. That's nobody else's business, except insofar as you want to sell it, and they should understand how you went about making it. But in terms of you as a maker, what you want to do, hey, if it floats your boat, you should do it your way. I recently did a couple of videos, one of them about making a wood carving knife using 0 power tools, and another about making a wood carving knife using, all kinds of fancy professional tools. The end results were pretty similar, and, to me, if you were a purchaser of those knives, you would, you should be happy with what you get, because they're both good knives. And, if I sell them to you, I'm disclosing exactly how I made them, what the costs and benefits of that are, what the pluses and minuses are for you as a user, as a buyer, as a collector, whatever. So that's my general point here, my general take on the whole handcraft issue. As long as everybody knows what you're doing, and as long as you're doing things that you find, comfortable to do and that produce good results, everybody should be happy. Hey guys, if you found value in this video, I hope you'll consider partnering with the channel to help us bring more videos, better videos, more knives, more techniques, all that cool stuff. Click the link to Patreon to help this channel. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, bro, what are you waiting on? And check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Also, If you're into Japanese swords, check out my website, waltersorrellsblades.com, where you'll see more of my work and where you'll find videos about the making of Japanese swords, along with mounting, fittings, polishing, hamones, all kinds of good stuff. Now, more videos.